Hey, it's Jake, and today I'm going to give you a quick jumpstart into Duik Bassel, version 16 that's finally here, and along with it are new systems for rigging and animating your characters. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the new structure system. I'm going to show you how to use the auto rig feature and even how to automate a walk cycle. It's pretty ridiculous. Before I get started, I just want to reiterate that this is not a full tutorial explaining everything there is with Duik Bassel. That is a humongous topic to be covered in future videos, but this is just going to give you a kind of an intro to the new system so you can get up and running with it, since it is different from the previous version. First time I jumped in, I didn't really have any instructions and it was a little bit confusing to me, so I just want to help you kind of get your feet wet and start rigging things with Duik Bassel. First of all, I want to point out that I am on version 16.0.1, so if you're watching this in the future, you may be on a newer version. There might be different features available, but for now, that's the version I'm on, and I'll put a link in the description of this video for where you can download Duik Bassel for free in case you haven't already. And I want to go ahead and start off by changing some of my settings. So I'm going to come over to right here, the settings button, and change this. I'm going to click it from rookie to standard. You have three options here. Rookie, Standard, and Expert. Rookie is not going to give you all of the features. Standard will give you everything with lots of tips and like text explanations, and Expert is going to be a stripped down version of all the features with more icons, less text. So I am still working in Standard because I'm still getting used to the interface, and I suggest that's what you do too. Once you've got it on Standard, click on Apply Changes. It'll restart, and then we can get to work. I'll jump back over to my Rigging tab, and I need to get my artwork in. Now, I'm working in a layout that I prefer for rigging because it gives me more room to see all of my layers, which is key when you're dealing with rigs. So I'm going to first import my artwork, which is right on my desktop. I have three versions of the same artwork, but I'm going to start with this one. I'm going to make sure to import it as a composition and retain the layer size as the footage dimensions. Click OK. Now, this is an Illustrator file that I'm basing this off of. I'll open that up. And here is my artwork set up, ready to be rigged. And I'm also going to make all of my project files, the source artwork and the After Effects projects, available for download. Just look in the description for the link. First thing I want to do is duplicate this comp and rename it Rig. So I have a copy of my original artwork comp in case I ever need to get back to it. It's kind of like a paper trail, and I'm going to be doing that at basically every step of the process. All right, now that that's there, I need to start rigging. Now, in the previous version, you would probably start by making bones, whether that's with the puppet tool or just keeping it all rigid. You would start by adding bones and then start linking everything up with IK systems and things like that. In this version of Duik, we have the structures feature, which is a brand new, much better way of rigging things inside of After Effects. You can think of structures kind of like a skeleton. It's the underlying system that drives your artwork. So we're going to make our structures first and then connect our artwork to that structure. Now, as you can see, there are lots and lots of different options. You can make arms, legs, spines, even tails, and you can even make your own custom structures. The first option, though, is going to make a full skeleton for your typical character. So a basic human type character with 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, a torso, all the things that make up a basic character. That's what I'm going to show you how to do here. So I'm going to start by just clicking on that, and Duik is going to run a whole bunch of magic, generate a whole bunch of layers. We can see the whole process happening right in front of us, and it's naming everything, organizing, parenting, and building this structure for us to continue rigging with. All right, so there we go. Now, obviously you can see that the structure does not match my character size, but that's totally fine. It's not supposed to. This is just the basic framework that I can then modify to fit my artwork. But if I were to grab, say, this little shape layer right here that represents the hand, I can grab that and move it around, and you see that I already have some responsiveness to parts of these limbs. If I grab this part of the arm, I can move it around, and you can start to see how this is all going to work. Now, there are 5 main systems here that I have to line up. I've got the left and right arms. And these are the 2 parents, the top part of each one of those arms. And then I have the legs. And then I have the spine, which runs from the hips all the way up to the tip of the head. So if I grab the hips and move it around, everything moves with it. And I know that that's what's going to move everything because it's red. The two spine sections are orange, the neck is yellow, the head is blue, and then we have a red tip again. So that's letting us know that that's the end. And if I scroll over here so we can see a little bit more of our layers, you can see that we even have markers with descriptions on here. So we know that these are all of our ends of our limbs and the spine. So it's very nice and organized. Let's start with the spine. First thing I want to do is align the hips. So I'm going to zoom in nice and close here. And the center of this black circle is where I want to put right in the center of my hips. So right about there looks good. Then I'll move on to the next section, the spine. So I'm going to grab the next section of the spine, which is for the lower half of the torso. I do have two different layers here, torso lower and torso upper. So I want to align this section of the spine with where I want the lower torso to rotate, which is basically right at the top of the hips. Now, it's going to make my structure look a little weird, but it's totally fine. That's what's so great about these structures is you can really customize them to your artwork. And I didn't give much height to these hips, so that's why it's kind of squashed in there. But then for the next section of the spine, I want to bring that down to right at this little bend here. That's where the torso upper ends. And I'm going to line that up right there. Then I'll bring the next section, the neck, right where I want that to rotate. And I might bring that to the left a little bit so it's centered there on the neck. And then for the head, I actually think I want to pull this up just a little bit so it rotates right around there. If I turn the head off, you can see that behind it, the neck rounds off right there, so that's going to be perfect. And then I'm going to grab the tip and just align that to the top of the head. Now, like I said, this is a brand new version of Duik. I honestly do not know the ins and outs of it yet. I have not seen any really fully flushed out documentation on where you need to place these controllers and things, but I've been aligning the center of the tip of the spine tip here, right at the top of the head, and I haven't had any problems. It may need to go someplace more like this for some reason, but I'm not quite sure. So I'm just going to leave it the way that I've had it so far. And then I'm going to move on to some of the limbs. So let's just do the arm real quick. I'll move the shoulder over here, and you want to make sure that you start with the root of the structure, which would be the part that connects to the body, because that is the parent of the entire limb. So if I were to move, the wrist before I moved the elbow, then the elbow movement's going to throw off the wrist, so I don't want to do that. Start at the root, work your way away from the body. All right, then I just need to grab the end of this, which I can't select, so let me move that leg out of the way. And this I'm just going to line up with the very tip. And to make this easier to see, I'm going to go into my composition settings and make the background 50% gray. That way it's just easier to line this up. And again, I'm not positive if this needs to line up with the tip of the hand or if it should be more in the center of the hand. I've been doing it at the tip. It seems to work out just fine. Okay, I'm going to continue this with the rest of the limbs. And you'll notice that I'm not moving from the ankle down to the heel. That's red, letting me know that that is the end of the limb and the last part of the parent chain. So I want to make sure I do the ankle and then the toes and then the tip toe. You see all of those move the heel around, and then I will finish it off by aligning the heel right there at my artwork. All right, now all of that is aligned, but I'm going to just quickly point out that I made my artwork in a perfectly vertical alignment. And by the way, I'm using these guides that I made on my artwork. They're all aligned to the exact center of where I want the joints to bend. And that makes it a lot easier for your rigs to actually work well and be a lot more seamless. So I'm just aligning all of the structures to those guides exactly. But because I align those in a perfect vertical line and they're all parented to each other, I can select these three structures and pull up the position, P on the keyboard, and then the X value of all three of these should be 0 so that they're perfectly aligned with the parent. So I'm going to 0 these three out, and I'll do the same thing for the other arm, and the exact same thing for the knees and the ankles. So the knee or the calf in the case of the structure should be 0. The foot should also be 0'd out. And I'll do that on the other two as well. There we go, 0, 0. Now everything is nice and aligned, set up with my artwork, and I can move on to the next step. So I need to go to the next panel inside of Duik, which is links and constraints. Again, we have lots and lots of different options here. You can be extremely customizable with the way that you're building your rig, but I want to focus on this one right here, Auto Rig and IK, because it's pretty amazing how well it works. To use it, I'm going to collapse all of my layers and then select all of the structures, which, by the way, you'll notice there's this prefix of S on all of these structure layers, letting you know that these are indeed structure layers. So I select all of those and then click on Auto Rig and IK. Again, Duik is going to work its magic, and when it's done, we're going to have all of these new overlays on top of our structure. All of these red icons that you're seeing are the controllers. I'm going to actually just turn off my artwork for a second so you can see that this really is starting to look kind of like a skeleton. If I were to grab this hand and move it, you see that we have the IK system built into that part of the structure now. Same thing with the feet. I can come up and grab the body controller and move that around, and it's starting to function fairly well. Now the arms are bending in the wrong direction, but that's a really easy fix. Just select the hand and then reverse the IK system. Do that real quick, and there we go. Now I should be able to move that guy around. All of the joints are now bending the way that they should be. All right, I'm going to undo that, and the next step is to start linking our artwork to that structure. And what's so great about this is that you can do it in a variety of ways. Now, this particular case, I want to make kind of a rigid character where the arms are not bendy, they're not noodly and rubber hose-like. Instead, they're just going to stay this nice, straight, rigid form. So all I have to do is parent the layers directly to the corresponding structure layers. So let's again start with the spine. The hips are at the bottom, so let me find my hips artwork layer, and then just parent that layer to it. Next, we have the spine. That's the lower section of the spine, so my torso lower. And then the torso upper is going to go to spine 2. I have a neck layer. That's going to go to the neck structure. A head. That's going to go to the head structure. And now all of that is linked to the rig underneath it. So if I were to grab the body control and move it around, see that the torso is all moving with it now. I can move it around. I can rotate it. I could grab the neck and rotate the head around. I could even grab the middle of the spine and kind of bend the torso in either direction. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to do the arms now. I'll turn off my guides layer so that's not in the way anymore, and find the right hand. That needs to go to the right hand controller, which Duik just labeled hand 2. So I can remember that 2 is the right side of the body, and that's from my perspective, the right side. It would actually be his left arm. But I'm going to go hand right and link that not to the controller hand, but to the structure hand 2 right there. Then I'll go to the forearm, link that to the forearm 2, arm 2, and so on. I'm going to do that for the rest of the artwork. Okay, now everything is parented up, and just like that, I can grab one of my hands, and the artwork is going to move with it. So at this point, I really don't need to see my structures layers anymore, so I'm just going to go over back to my structures tab and go down to show hide. Actually, I'm going to make sure nothing is selected first, and then click on show hide, and that hides all of the structures, and now I'm just left with my controllers. The controllers are driving the structures, and the structures are driving the artwork. This is a fantastic new way to rig characters in After Effects because it allows you to independently adjust your artwork layers from the actual rig that's creating the motion. What I mean by that is that I could easily grab any of my artwork layers and adjust them either by moving them around. I'm not sure why I would want to, but let's say that I want his head to come down a little bit more. I can do that and it doesn't affect the rig. This even works for rigs that use the puppet tool because just like in previous versions of Duik, you can add bones to pins and then parent those bones to the structure in the exact same way that I parented the artwork to it. All right, so to clean everything up a little bit, I'm going to lock all of my artwork. I'm going to shy all of that artwork, and then I'm going to shy all of these structure layers as well, and then just shy everything. So I'm left with just the controllers. Now I'm going to rename anything with a 2 just to R really quickly. And then I'm going to put an L on the other layers just so I know which one's the left, which one's the right. And I don't really like the color red on these controllers, so I'm going to just jump over to my Create Controllers tab, select all of my controllers by clicking on Select Controllers, and then go down to edit. Then I can just click once on this color and then pick a different one in my color wheel, maybe a bright cyan, something like that. Close out and that will update. And I can go back out and now see my controllers a little bit better over my artwork. Now that everything's looking right, it's placed right, and I have my IKs going in the right direction, I'm going to actually select all of these one more time and then go over to the links and constraints tab one more time. And the very bottom is add 0. Before I click on it, I'm just gonna press P to bring up the position. You'll notice that all of these have position values relative to their parents or to the composition. I want to zero all of these out so I know that this is my neutral position and I can always get back to it just by zeroing out the numbers. To do that, just click on add 0. Duik does some magic, and just like that, all of my properties are now set to 0. So I can always know how far away from the neutral position I'm getting just based on the value of the position properties. And now I'm ready to start animating this character. But another amazing feature of Duik 16, Duik Bassel, is this automation tab and this button right here, walk cycle. Before we get to that, I'm just gonna duplicate this one more time. So I have a copy of my rig and I'm going to rename this new one walk cycle. Double click on it, and then I'll select all of my controllers and click on walk cycle. Very quickly, we've got another controller and suddenly my character has kind of moved into this walking pose. I'm just gonna grab this controller and move it over here. You can see it's got a foot on it and a gear with the play button, just like we see down here. And if I just hit play, my character is walking. I don't know if that's mind-blowing to you, but it certainly is to me. I know what it takes to produce a walk cycle, and I realize that this isn't perfect just how it is right now. But considering that I did absolutely no animation work at all, and I have a walking character with one button click, is ridiculous. And what's great is that you can customize this a lot. So if I click on my walk cycle controller, you see that we have a whole bunch of parameters to modify the way that he's walking. So the general motion right now is set to 100, and you can use this value to stop or start the cycle. That literally means that I could start this at 0, and then say 10 frames forward, set a keyframe, go forward another 10 frames, set that up to 100. I'll press U to bring up my keyframes, let that walk for, I don't know, 60 frames, set another keyframe, go forward 10 more frames and set that back down to 0. Now if I preview this, we're gonna see my character begin to walk for 60 frames, and then ease out of his walk back into his neutral position. That's absolutely ridiculous. And on top of this is all procedural, so I could grab, say, the body and drop him down a little bit so that his neutral pose looks a little bit more relaxed. And it's still going to animate. But it doesn't stop there. I'm gonna take off the animation and just leave it at a general motion of 100. Actually, let's turn it up to 150 and see how that affects the motion. You can see that that kind of makes the stride a little bit longer and the overall motion is just a little bit bigger, a little bit more intense. If we come down to main parameters, we can control specific parts of this walk. So the character tab is going to give us specific controls for things like the height. So I could increase this to 220 centimeters, and that's going to change the way that he walks. I could increase his weight from 70 kilograms to, say, 100 kilograms, and that's going to change the way that he walks. I'm going to turn that down to, say, 60, and then maybe increase the energy from 10 to 20. You see, that adds a lot more bounciness to his step. I could turn up the softness. Right now it's set to 20. If I increased it to 50, then he's going to be way more limp and kind of goofy with his walk. That's probably too much. Let me put that back down to 20. I'll close that up and then we can look at the walk cycle tab. So this is where we're going to determine how quickly he's walking. So I could really slow that down. I would probably want to turn down the energy at this point from 20 back down to 10. And maybe walk speed of 1 isn't quite fast enough. So I'll go to -2 instead. I can also change the type from realistic to dancing. where he's doing just a normal walk to doing more of a bounce walk. I'm going to set that back to realistic and change the speed back to what it was at. All right, I'll close those up, and then we'll go into the secondary controls. This is where we can control individual limb adjustments. So the neck and head bobble right now. If I twirl that open, I could increase the neck swing to be twice as much, and then his head is going to move more. Could also increase the neck softness. If I change that to 30%, you're going to see something a lot more like a bobblehead. We'll move on to the body. We can do the same thing here. I could increase the body swing to 6 instead of 3, and now his torso is going to go back and forth a little bit more. If you wanted him to move up and down a little bit, I could change the body up and down to 10% instead of 5. Now he's going to jump up and down a little bit more when he walks. Maybe 10's too much. I'll drop that down to 8. And you can see that the hips are kind of rotating as he's stepping. That's what this hip swing control is going to do. Right now it's only 4 degrees. If I increase it up to 8, his hips are going to kind of go crazy. It's probably way more than I need them to. So I'll undo back down to 4. All right, moving on to the arms. I don't really like how slow these arms are moving. They're kind of just dangling right now. So I'm going to turn the swing up to, say, 12 degrees instead of 7. And now they're just going to swing a little bit more. If I turn that softness up to maybe 12 as well, or even 20, then they're going to really sway back and forth as he walks. And let's say I don't like how far back this hand is rotating as it's going in the backwards motion. It kind of looks weird right there. Well, I can at any point just grab the hand controller, find the FK for it, go into the individual controls, go down to the goal, and I can adjust this property. Now, there is a keyframe on this property, so I want to make sure to have the keyframes up. I'll press U on the controller, find that goal, which is set to 11 degrees. I'll just add another keyframe and rotate them both at the same time so I can see it on this particular frame. Let's say I only want to bend the hand back that far. Now I've done that, I can delete the second keyframe and play it back again. Great, let's see what else we can adjust. So that's the arms. We also have feet. Right now, feet height is set to 50. I'm just going to pause and find a point where the leg is crossing over. So right about there. If I increase the feet height, you see that's going to lift his foot higher up off the ground as he's picking it up. So I'm going to change that to something around 70. And then we can control the foot rotation, how far back that bends. Maybe 140 would be good. You can see what that looks like. Now he just steps a little bit higher with his walk. And then hit the ground. I'm pretty sure if you just look at the way that the toes are flopping on the ground as each foot touches the ground, that's just going to increase how dramatic that contact is going to be. You see how that's lifting the toes up higher as I increase that, and it's going to make that foot slap down on the ground a little bit more intense. All right, now all I have to do is find a point where it loops. So let me go to, say, frame 40. And I want to find a similar frame to this for my loop. So I'm going to take a snapshot and then go forward 10 frames, go forward 10 more frames, compare that, and then step forward a few frames. Looks like right about there is almost a perfect looping frame. So I'm going to page up 1 frame back from that point, set my out point by pressing N on the keyboard, B to set my in point, and then preview that work area, and I have a seamless loop. I can turn off all of these controls, see what that looks like. It's amazing. Now, obviously, that is not perfect. Like I said, I know what it takes to make a walk cycle, and this is not going to be a replacement for making custom walk cycles for your custom characters, but the possibilities that this is opening up are pretty ridiculous, and there are going to be times where this walk cycle built into Duik Bassel is going to be perfectly acceptable for the project that you're working on. If you were working on a project where you needed a bunch of characters in the background that were all the same basic shape, and you just needed them walking around, you could do this once, duplicate the rig and replace the artwork, and easily adjust some of the walk cycle parameters to make them slightly more unique, and very quickly have a scene full of walking rigged characters. But another part of this that's so fantastic is that I could take this comp, and I'll duplicate it one more time, and I'll rename it Textured, and then bring in another piece of artwork that I have, a PSD, that is a different version of the same character. I want to again import it as a composition with retaining layer sizes. Click OK, and then make sure that that textured walk cycle comp is open. I'll unshy my layers and unlock all of these artwork layers. Now I have the exact same layers in my PSD, named exactly the same and all the same size. They're just drawn with brushes inside of Photoshop instead of Illustrator artwork. But even though this is rigged and animated, I can just swap out these layers and it's still going to work. So I'm just gonna start swapping stuff out. I'll start at the top and work my way down. And I'm doing this by selecting the layer that I want to replace, then grabbing the corresponding layer in my project panel, clicking and dragging while holding Option or Alt on a PC, dragging that layer over my timeline and letting go of the mouse. And that's going to swap the artwork. It'll replace my Illustrator art with the PSD. All right, here's my updated textured hand-drawn version of the same character. I'll RAM preview once again, and my walk cycle is still preserved. It was that easy to swap out my artwork. And if you've used previous versions of Duik, you realize that would have been an entirely different process. It would have been much more difficult, and I pretty much would have had to rebuild the entire rig from scratch. Now, the lower part of the torso looks like it's a little out of alignment. It's an easy fix though. Because the artwork isn't the source of the animation, it's parented to the structure that's driving the animation, I can grab the torso lower layer and just tap the up arrow a few times until it doesn't poke out there at the bottom of the hips, and the joint between the lower and upper torsos is a little bit more seamless. And then maybe the hips need to move up just a little bit too. I'll pop that up. And there we go. On the fly, I'm able to adjust my character art even while the walk cycle is playing. And like I said, you can do this exact same process using a puppet tool system. So if I were to bring in my other copy of my artwork, this bendy Illustrator art, the limbs are not going to be separated. And by that I mean there's not an upper and lower arm. It's just one single arm for the right, a full leg on the right as well. And from here I can put puppet pins in all of the joints and add bones to them. So I'll show you how I do that with the arm and then finish off the rig really quick. So just change my background color one more time, 50% gray, and then I'm going to solo that and the guides layer. Then I'll zoom in here, switch to my puppet tool, and then add a pin right in the center of each one of these joints. I want to make sure that I can see my mesh and that the engine is not advanced, it's legacy. That's very important for this. I'm going to turn my triangles all the way up, and the expansion looks fine. And then I'm going to press U to bring up my keyframes and rename my pins. So we've got the wrist right, we've got the elbow right, and we've got the shoulder right. Now that that's done, I'll select all three of them, go back to Duik into the links and constraints, and I want to click on Add Bones. This is going to add bone controllers for each one of those. Now if I grab one, it's going to drive that puppet system. And from here, I can parent those bones to the actual structure instead of the artwork itself. So I'm going to do that really quick for the rest of my limbs, and we can move on. Now that I have all these bones driving the pins, I'm going to make sure to lock the artwork that has puppet tools applied. So that would be both arms. There's arm R and arm L. Got leg L and leg R. There we go, our four limbs. And then I'm going to actually add some pins into the torso as well. This is one piece. So I'm again going to just switch to my puppet tool, add one right about the center of the chest, again between these two shoulders. Then one down at the midpoint, right where it bends, and then one at the base, right where the hips meet. I'll name those torso hips, torso mid, and torso chest. And then I also want to do the same thing to my neck. So I'm going to solo that, add a pin at the base, one at the tip, make sure that is set to legacy. I don't think I did that on my original puppet tool. Let me change that on the torso upper. There we go. And then rename those pins. So puppet pin for the neck tip or top, either one works, and the neck base. All right, add bones for all of these at once is totally fine to do all of them at once. Add bones. There we go. And now I have bones driving all of these systems. I'll lock the neck and the torso as well. And now I just need to remake my hominoid structure aligned to all of these guides once more. So I'll do that quickly. Okay, my structure is lined up to my artwork. Again, with the pins here, it looks slightly different just because of the way that I placed the pins compared to the way that I had my artwork lined up in the previous rig. But now that that's good to go, I can move on to my auto rig and IK, select all my structures, and auto rig and IK. Again, this has not done anything to control the artwork yet. It's just built the structure for us to link things to. But on this particular rig, I want to link a lot of these bones to the structure instead of just the artwork layer. Some of the layers are still going to be linked directly, but anything we put the puppet tool on won't be. So let's again just go in the order from the hips up. So let's find our hips layer right here and parent, and I'm going to continue up the list. This time for the spine, instead of the lower torso, I want to grab the torso upper, which is this entire layer, and find the hips bone. I want to parent that to the lower spine, and then the mid to the upper spine. And then the chest, I'm going to parent that one to the neck. That's this point right here. And then the neck base is also going to be parented to the neck. That's this pin. And then the neck tip goes to the head, as well as the head. And then I've got the arm, which would be the left upper arm. So I'm going to find the arm L and shoulder and parent that to the arm, the elbow to the forearm, and the wrist to the hand. Then I'm going to find the left hand artwork layer and parent that to the hand layer as well. And I'll continue this for the rest of my artwork. Okay, now everything is parented up, and I should be able to turn off my structures layers, as well as all of these bones, and I should be able to lock all of those bones in the artwork as well. So I'm left with just the controllers. Now, for some reason, my controllers are really tiny, so I want to select all of them. So I'll deselect all of my controllers, select controllers, edit, and then change the size from custom to, looks like small is what the default is. That looks good. And now I can test out the rig. So let me shy all of these other extra layers that I don't need to see, turn all those off, and before I do anything else, I'm just going to select them all and zero out the properties. So again, links and constraints, add 0. Now I know that's all zeroed out, and I need to turn off my guides layer. There we go. Much better. Now I can test out the IK system and see if it worked. To do that, I'm just going to drop the body down a little bit, and the legs worked, but the arms didn't. So I'll swap those around real quick. And there you go. Now I have a more bendy rig that's driven by the puppet tool system. And you can use puppet starch if you want to add some points that don't bend quite as much. But this is all now being driven by the same rigging system. So I can move all of these little controls around and everything is nice and bendy. Now, I could obviously have done a better job with the way that I prepped my artwork and prepped the rig, but you get the idea. You can see where this can take you. And just like before, I could go into my automation, select all of my controllers, click on walk cycle, and immediately have a walk cycle going for me. I'm going to move that controller out of the way and start previewing, and there you go. I've got my walk cycle, turn off all those controllers, and from here I can start manipulating these parameters again. Okay, I realized that was actually a decent chunk of time, but we didn't even scratch the surface of all of the capabilities that Duik 16 has. Duik Bassel is mind-blowingly complex and flexible to work with whatever you're trying to rig. And I really want to take this opportunity to say that you should really support the people who are making these scripts. They are not getting paid for it at all. It is always going to be a free script, but you can support the work that they do through Patreon. So I'll put a link in the description of this video for that as well. And I'd even recommend that if you're a freelancer working for clients, put in a Duik fee into your contract. They don't have to see it. Just work it into your own personal budget so that you can make a contribution to their efforts every time that you're using their script in one of your projects. Because let's be honest, without Duik, character animation inside of After Effects would be almost impossible. And if you want extensive training on how to rig and animate characters inside of After Effects, I can't recommend highly enough Rigging Academy and Character Animation Bootcamp, both from School of Motion. And they are not paying me to say this. They have no idea that I'm recommending this in my own video, but I've taken Character Animation Bootcamp, and that has very quickly gotten me up and running with how character rigs in After Effects work and how to make character animations. And Rigging Academy is like the After Effects character rigging Bible. It will literally show you how to rig any type of character and any part of that character in any style. And they're going to even be updating it for Duik Bassel very soon. And that is a free upgrade. People who have already paid for Rigging Academy will be getting that update. Okay, I'll stop advertising other people, but honestly, School of Motion is my favorite place to learn motion design, and you should absolutely check it out if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. I hope you got something out of it. If there's anything in it that was a little bit confusing to you, or there are other questions that you have about Duik 16, please let me know, and I'll try and put some more tutorials together. Thanks again so much, and I'll see you in the next one.
Animating.